Hello, my name is Leyna Trinh, and although I am not a US citizen, I basically got the full Asian American experience because my family immigrated here ever since I was 9 years old, and I have been living in California for basically more than half of my life. Therefore, I identify as Vietnamese Asian American, and I am proud to be part of our community. So, over the past semester, by taking this course, it has completely reshaped the way I think about my identity and my place in the world, and even how I view the challenges and strength of our community as a whole. So growing up, I often feel torn between the expectation of being a model minority and the reality of my own experiences. I have learned how often this stereotype paints Asian American as successful and compliant while ignoring the diversity and struggles within our experiences and in our community. So as a result, I didn't always see like our stories about how hardworking we are, how resilient, and even like about our hardship reflected in mainstream media or conversation. Consequently, this stereotype also create a barrier between us and other marginalized group, which makes me think about how our community can work towards a greater solidarity. As I learn more about our struggles in our community throughout the course, I also have been reflecting on how Asian communities were racialized during COVID-19. As a high school freshman when the pandemic began, I noticed how anti-Asian sentiment grew online in public spaces as if we were the one responsible for the pandemic, making me more aware of how quickly prejudice can manifest in times of fear. So this class has been really helpful with helping me understand that these experiences aren't just isolated, they're a part of a larger system that has been historically marginalized Asian communities. Additionally, it made me aware of how we can challenge these narratives by coming together as a community to support one another. So there are two concepts I want to talk about. The first one being the model minority myths as like a tool of division and oppression. One of the most striking moments for me was realizing that the model minority myth isn't just like a harmless stereotype. It's like a calculated narrative that served to uphold systematic racism. I learned that this myth emerged during the civil rights era as a way to pit Asian American against African American by framing Asian communities as the ideal minority. This framing implied that systematic barriers aren't the root cause of our inequality, placing the blame on individuals or community instead. So understanding this myth through Kat Chow's work and the lens of racial triangulation was very eye-opening for me. The concept of racial triangulation show how Asian Americans are positioned as better than Black Americans in terms of compliance and success, but are still very excluded from the full societal inclusion. This isn't progress, it's a tactic to reinforce white supremacy. The 2023 Supreme Court case on affirmative action illustrated how this myth is weaponized to create divisions among communities that should be united in fighting systematic inequality. Another key moment was connecting the model minority myth to the surge in anti-Asian hate during COVID-19 pandemic. While Asian Americans were idealized as the model minority in certain contexts, they were quickly scapegoated during time of crisis, revealing how fragile and conditional this supposed privilege is. Erica Lee's The Making of Asian American described how the model minority myth generalizes and oversimplifies Asian cultures, masking the inequality that we face. At the same time, during the periods of social or economic instability, Asian Americans have been portrayed as threats, feeling the xenophobia and exclusionary policy, which leads me to my second concept of the precariousness of model minority status. So to emphasize this further, Lee highlights how in the late 19th and early 20th century, Chinese immigrants were labeled as disease carriers and economic threats, leading to the legislation in the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. The same pattern emerged during COVID-19, where, as Kathy Park Hong points out, the hypervisibility of Asian American wearing a mask associated them with the disease itself. So masks became a symbol of COVID-19, and those who wore them, particularly Asians, became targets of violence. This resurgence of anti-Asian hate, which Hong calls a different strain of Asian American racism, pulls directly from what she described as the dark vaults of American society, echoing policies like the Page Act and the Chinese Exclusion Act. Recognizing this historical pattern has been one of my aha moments. It made me realize that how deeply rooted and adaptable racism against Asian American is. This knowledge has helped me see that these moments of crisis are not isolated but part of a reoccurring strategy to rationalize exclusions and violence. More importantly, it made me more aware of how we as a community can respond by addressing these historical patterns, building solidarity with others who face similar scapegoating, and advocating for policies that protect all marginalized groups. Now I see my identity not just as a personal story, but as a part of a broader history of resistance, resilience, and solidarity. I hope to use what I learned to better advocate for our community and make sure that our voice, struggles, and successes are seen and heard. Thank you for listening. Bye.